I'm going to go ahead with the meeting beginning ritual.
起立，面向佛堂，参加三鞠躬、一鞠躬、再鞠躬、三鞠躬，参加各位点传世一鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated.
道德经 Chapter 7. So here we are. And in consideration for those who weren't here before, I'll just go ahead and read it from beginning to end. This is a very short chapter, so that's not going to take long. Heaven and earth are everlasting. The reason heaven and earth can last forever is that they do not exist for themselves. Thus, they can last forever. Therefore, the sages place themselves last, but end up in front, are outside of themselves, and yet survive. Is it not due to their selflessness? That is how they can achieve their own goals. All right, so what we did was that we were, in the first meeting about the Tao Te Ching 7, we were able to divide it up into two halves. We did that simply by noting that in the middle of the chapter, we have the explanation starting with the phrase, therefore the sages, and then talking about the sages from that point on to the end of the chapter. And we found a nice poetic couplet here, two lines with many of the characters repeating, as you can see. This is quite obvious when you look at the Chinese original, even if you don't know ancient or classical Chinese. And not as obvious is in the first section, I pointed out that the very first line is a four-character idiomatic expression, what the modern Mandarin-speaking people call 成语. And oftentimes, the order can be swapped. In the second and third character, in order for you to understand better what the meaning really is. And in fact, it's done something similar in that if you were to swap the second and third characters, you get Tendi, heaven and earth, which is exactly what we have in line 2. Then it goes on with the adjectives, the long in terms of time, and then lasting in terms of durability. So in that first section, it talks about the observation of the sages that heaven and earth are far more lasting than everything that is contained in heaven and earth. That is to say, when we look at the material world, we see pretty much everything is transient. Nothing really lasts. We look around at human affairs, we look around at one another, we see people, we see that people are born, they go through childhood, they go through teenage years, they become adults, they go into middle age, they end up as, hopefully as a useful member of society, they grow old, and one day they pass away. And that is only if they have lived a relatively uneventful life, that their lives are not claimed by tragedy, such as accidents or injuries or illness, that take them before their time is really up. But either way, whether they are gone because of illness, because of accident, because of other tragedies, or because they simply age and it's time for them to go at a very old age, well, either way, even when they're lasting into very old age, to us, we would think of 80, 90, over 100 years old as being very old. Even when that is the case, that's still just a blink in the cosmic scale of time. So when we think about human life, we may be under the illusion that a year is a long time, 5 years is a long time, 10 years is a long time. But in the cosmic scheme of things, those really don't last at all. Those really are not lasting. So compared to the setting, in which the myriad things live and thrive, we don't last any more than just an instant. Whereas heaven and earth just keep on going. They continue on seemingly forever, as you see here. So we went through the first section last time, and we are now in the second section, which explains about the behavior of the sages, why they do what they do, and the results, the consequence of their own action. So starting with, therefore, the sages, and then we have the line, place themselves last, but end up in front. So we understand what this means. We're saying that the sages placing themselves last, meaning that they want to serve the group. They want to look after the group's needs rather than themselves. They don't really have any intention of placing themselves first, which would mean that they put themselves in a leading position. Rather, they put themselves in a serving position, in a helping or supporting position, a supportive position. But as oftentimes happens, when people see that there's one person who's quite capable, who knows what's going on, and who is clearly, consistently, always supporting the group, the thing they then want to do is to say, hey, listen, we should put that person out in front to lead us. That person becomes a sort of a natural leader. Now, if the sage understands the Tao of leadership, the sage can lead without seemingly leading. What that means is that the sage can be getting everyone together, combining everyone's talent and time and effort to do something great. So actually leading, but people don't feel like they're being told what to do. People don't feel like they're being pressured into doing things they don't want to do. So when something great has been accomplished, if you were to ask those people, they will say, oh, we don't have a leader. That was really just our own idea. We just kind of came together organically and we got it done. It was us. So they don't realize that in a seamless way, the Tao sage has provided this crucial leadership, but leadership at the highest level, leadership that is so seamless that people don't even detect it. A lot of people will not detect it. So that's what we mean by this line, place themselves last, but end up in front. The very last point that we discussed last time was the possible paradox that this would give rise to. That is, so what exactly is in the mind of the sages? They know that if they place themselves last, that they're going to end up in front. So is this their master plan all along, that they want to end up in front, and therefore they begin by pretending to only want to work in the back so they can be pushed to the front? Is that how it goes? If so, then isn't this sort of like a hidden agenda? Like, the sage is actually like a master manipulator, right? But in the Tao, we also know that if that is the intention that they have in the beginning, that they can short circuit the whole process themselves. That it won't work if you are going into something with a great deal of attachment. That you want a particular outcome, i.e. end up in front to lead. And if you do, then you won't get it because you want it too badly. So do the sages really want to be in front or not? And how does that work? Is it a paradox? So the example that I provided last time, I hope will shed some light on that particular discussion. In case you don't recall, I want to bring back that particular slide. What exactly is the mindset? The mindset of a sage or a Tao cultivator who wants to, who starts out serving others, but then ends up with great deal of benefit, great deal of wisdom. Sort of like saying that when Bill, Alex, and myself, when our purpose, our goal is to share the Tao wisdom with everybody, somehow we end up partaking in the process and gain in wisdom ourselves. So is that the master plan all along? Are we, taking advantage of this process? How does that work? And if we did, should we not have gone into it with attachments and therefore, end up not working? So how aware are the Tao cultivators? Are we that being selfless will end up becoming self-serving? So, if we are aware, and isn't that being selfish in the first place? And wouldn't that mean that it's just not going to work out no matter what? So, the very first point that I made last time, just a quick review for everyone, is that intention and action both matter in the Tao. It's like the yin and yang. You can't have just one and not the other. You've got to have both intention and action aligned. So in terms of yin and yang, action will be the yang half of the complementary duality. And the thinking, the intention, will be on the yin side of the complementary duality. Both have to come together. Both have to be targeted at a particular objective. So it is not true that Tao cultivators or Tao sages or Tao masters don't have goals. That is a misrepresentation primarily in the Western world. And it's made by scholars and people who really don't have an in-depth understanding of what the Tao actually says. The Tao has never expressed that Tao sages do not have goals. Quite the opposite. So intention is important, just as actions are important. So what is the intention to begin with? If that intention to start with is a self-serving agenda, you are being manipulated, you will indeed end up sabotaging yourself. That's just how the world works. On the other hand, if your intention is not a self-serving agenda, if it is simply an objective to serve other people, if you let go of self-serving thoughts, then the Tao process will ensure positive outcomes for you. And the best way to understand that is to look at the example of gardening. So the mindset of the Tao cultivator is similar to that of the gardener. So I am repeating this last part of the presentation from last time. My hope is that when other people are asking you the same question, so are you or are you not, out to seek benefits for yourself? And isn't that a paradox? You can say, no, it's actually not a paradox. It's sort of like gardening. So the gardener doesn't work out of complete ignorance, doesn't work in random fashion. The gardener has an objective, and that objective is to plant seeds. And the gardener has knowledge of gardening. The gardener knows how plants work. So the awareness is already there as you're planting seeds, that many of these seeds will grow up and bloom beautifully as beautiful flowers. So in this case, planting the seeds of good deeds, positive deeds, some of these seeds will bloom as beautiful flowers of positive karmic outcome. So being aware of how karma works is like the gardener becoming aware of how plants work, how biology works. So the gardener is not going into it with an obsessive kind of attachment. Sort of like the gardener has no idea which seed specifically will bloom beautiful. And he doesn't know when. He doesn't know the date. As the seeds are growing, he is not, the gardener he or she is not so obsessed about it that he will go into the garden and pull up the stalks of the plants to compel them to grow faster. That doesn't work. That's actually going to damage the plant. That will be attachment at work, sabotaging one's own effort. So what the gardener does instead is that he lets everything be without interference. He lets everything be without additional meddling on his part, so that the flowers will bloom at their own time, on their own schedule. That's how they can grow best. So what the gardener focuses on instead is the work of gardening that is in front of him. You know, and that may be to clear out some weeds, that may be to plant additional seeds, it may be to rearrange some parts of it, of the garden. You know, whatever the case may be, he's got additional work that's in front of him. So, generally speaking, just because the gardener knows how plants grow, that will not prevent the plants from growing. In a similar way, just because the Tao sages are aware of how karma and how the Tao process works, that doesn't mean that they will end up sabotaging the Tao process. They will not end up short-circuiting the karmic mechanism. So that's why. And that's why we should all feel quite comfortable in following the guidance of this particular chapter, in proceeding with our lives, in doing the things that we know are the right things to do. Doing the right things and doing them right. So that's one of the reasons for us to cultivate the Tao. And in Buddhism, that would be phrased or expressed as walking the right path, doing the right work, thinking the right thoughts, taking the right actions, and so on. So with that quick review from last time, I feel like we're ready to move on to the next line. Okay, so let's proceed with this line that says, is it not due to their selflessness? Question mark. Now, I want to work on this line by starting from the very last character. This character is a very good example of a character that means something different in modern Mandarin as it does in ancient or classical Chinese. So, and then I will talk about the character right in front of it. So let's start with this last character first. In modern Mandarin, if you see this character, it will be pronounced xie, and it always has one meaning. It really just has one meaning. If you see this in modern Mandarin, it just means evil. So you might see it, for instance, in like a horror movie. You know, it may be in the title of a horror movie, xie, and you may use this character. It's a pretty common character that when you're talking about something that was really bad, something that was awful, that to the point of being evil, you could use that character, xie, to describe that something. So what about here? This is definitely not modern Mandarin. So in many cases, we have already seen that in modern Mandarin, the meaning is the same as in ancient times. And we have plenty of characters in this particular chapter where the meaning today is the same as the meaning that it used to be 2,500 years ago. But there are also plenty of other characters where the meaning is completely different. This is an example of a character that is completely different in ancient or classical Chinese. So here, in the context of ancient Chinese, it doesn't mean evil at all. Not even close. And it's not even related. There's no spillover meaning in this particular case. And pronunciation is different. Instead of xie, it is pronounced ye. So here, it's another one of those characters used as a punctuation. In this case, a question mark. So remember what I said before, ancient Chinese, there's no punctuation mark. They use characters for that purpose, and this is it. So this right here this is translated to no English words whatsoever. It's properly translated as the question mark at the very end. Okay, so having talked about that, let's work our way back and talk about this next to last character. What is it? What does that mean? So in pinyin, it will be like S-I. In this case, it's got the same meaning in modern times as it did in ancient times. And what that meaning is, denotes something that's private, personal, something that is just for yourself. So those of you who are studying Mandarin today, you will find this particular character used quite often. So people may talk about 隐私权, which is the right to privacy. And other people may refer to 私房钱, which means private funds, money they have put away just for themselves. So that character is very commonly seen today. It's very often used. One of those characters that was used in ancient times. You can tell that it's been used here next to the last character and then the very last character here. And the very last character of the next line is actually the very last character of the step. Let's keep moving. What about, so here's the question. What about this character in front of 思? Let's take a look. 无 is the character in front of 思. So together it will be 无思. It will be like WU for 无 and then SI for 思. Now, if 思means private or personal, something that's just for yourself, 无, what is that? Well, it's the same 无 as 无为, which means a negation or not having any, to have none. So when you put none in front of 思, having no, 思, you're talking about something that is not concerned with the self, not something that's just devoted to oneself, which means selfless. Selfless as in being altruistic. So to be altruistic is to be concerned with the well-being of other people ahead of your own well-being. So what is the meaning here? What are we trying to say? So when we talk about 无私 and we're connecting this to the sages, this is specifically saying that sages are never driven by selfish needs. They do what they do in order to benefit others, not themselves. So that's one of the qualifications required to be a true sage. As I mentioned previously, there are very few true sages in the world, and they don't necessarily, study the Tao. People have a tendency to look at the ordained masters and say, well, they must be sages. Well, actually, no, they're Tao cultivators just like you and me. They have their own personal journey that they have to traverse, just as you have your own and I have mine. So we're all, in that sense, travel companions. We're walking together, which, by the way, for me, is a great privilege. It's a great privilege for me to be able to walk together with you. So back to the Tao Te Ching. The sages do what they do. You can ascend to the level of a sage if you finally have figured this part out about life and then have devoted yourself to be in service of other people. Now, sages also understand the Tao of moderation. So when they work for the benefits of other people, they will not do so in extreme fashion so that they damage their own abilities to continue giving and helping. They will do the appropriate amount based on their ability, time, resources. But bottom line is that they will always help. And it's always about other people. It's never about them. Just like the gardener, knowing that when you plant these seeds for beautiful flowers, that you're going to end up with some beautiful flowers. Not sure exactly when, not sure which seed specifically, but that's what's going to happen. Because the gardener knows the underlying principles behind how a garden works. In a similar way, sages understand how the Tao works. They know, they already are aware that their positive actions helping other people will ultimately come back to them as positive energy. Okay, now we are ready to tackle the last line, which, by the way, is going to require the most work of this entire chapter. So stick with me. This is the part where I need everyone to pay closer attention. So we start out deciphering this particular line. 故能成其思, translated as that is how they can achieve their own goals. So I am singling out, highlighting the characters, and here we are. Here's the pinyin, 故能成其思. So this one right here may catch people. People may look at this and say ki or kui. What is that? Well, in pinyin, it's always the ch sound. So it sounds like 不能成其思, like this. And you may be asking, well, why don't they just use ch in the first place? Wouldn't that be easier? Well, okay, no, that's one of the flaws in the pinyin system. But let's not dwell on that. Let's move on to the actual meaning. What I have done in approaching this particular line is that I break out the characters one by one to explain the meaning for each one. That way, you can see how it corresponds with the final translation that you see here on the right. So here's the literal line. 故, the first character, thus, therefore, so. 能, can, able to. 成, accomplish, achieve, to complete. 其, their, his, hers, is a possessive. 私, personal, private, and that's it. So, one thing to note, in ancient or classical Chinese, 故能成其思 very easily understood to mean personal what, private what, well, goals and objectives. But you can tell when we break it down character by character that there's not one specific character there for goals or objectives. That is something that has to be added. It belongs to the set of minimal additions that a translator can add to the original in order to avoid having it not make any sense when it's literally translated. And that's about the only exception. So the vast majority, pretty much every single one of the translations out there, they take liberties by adding in things that have no business being in the translation. But when I do it, I have to be so extremely careful to add only the bare minimum. So when you put this all together, you can have like a first pass translation that will sort of resemble the ending, thus can accomplish their personal. What is that? First pass translation. Therefore, they can accomplish their personal goals. So then the only addition really is the last word, last English word here. Okay, so let's explore the meaning. Motivational speaker Zig Ziglar oftentimes like to say, you can get what you want if you just have enough other people get what they want. Okay, he loved to say that. He said that many times, and it's very true. It reflects this particular sentiment, this idea from the Tao Te Ching that the sages can have what they want in life by making sure others get what they want. So now we have to be a little more specific. So what do the sages want? And what do people want? And how are they connected together? So one way to look at it is, as I have expressed, the real life example that myself, Bill, and Alex, we've been sharing what we understand of the Tao wisdom, providing that to people who are looking for that, who can benefit from that. But then we discovered in the process that we're the ones that, really benefit the most from making these presentations, because we end up understanding it a whole lot better. It's no different from teachers of any subject. They always say, if you really want to understand something, teach it. When you teach it, you will have no choice but to understand it as well as you possibly can, as well as humanly possible. So that's the realm that we're getting into right now. So in general, what the sages want is the joy and fulfillment, this true happiness of the Tao. The joy and fulfillment in providing assistance along the journey of life. So, and let me be clear as to what that journey, what can happen in that journey of life. What role do the sages have to play? And I break it down into 4 different categories, and let me present to you what those 4 categories are. Number 1, for those, new human souls, for the new souls, young souls who are just starting out in this journey of life through eternity, what the sages have to do is to point them in the right direction, is to say, there are many possible paths in life that you can take. But the path that's going to work out probably the best of all is this particular path. If you go this way, that will be a good starting point for you. That'll be a good beginning for your own personal journey. So point people in the right direction. So you act sort of as a guide. So what's next? Take a look. So the journey of life, we know, is not always smooth. Sometimes there are things that happen. Now, the path of the Tao is easy to walk. It's broad, it's flat, there's not a whole lot of excitement, there are no dangers, there's no drama. That's the thing about the Tao. No danger, no drama. So people may feel, oh, well, this is kind of boring. I, really need more of an adventure. Well, that's not the Tao. The Tao is about peace. It's about learning, discovery. It's not about danger to your personal self. It's not about having a lot of drama or chaos in your life. So on this flat, broad, easy to walk path, it is still possible for human beings to stumble. It's not because that there's something that you trip over. More often than not, it's because of a personal failing. Like, for instance, you're on the path, you're walking, but you're not paying attention to the rise and fall of the road. So you are putting your foot down at a place where you thought you had pretty firm footing, but then, your foot misses. It's not quite, the ground is not quite what you thought it was, so you stumble and fall. So what that means is that those who cultivate the Tao in life, they can have moments of doubt, moments where they falter. And, ouch, I just banged my knee. What's going on? They're on the ground nursing a hurt knee. So the job of the sage is to then come along and say, hey, let me help you up. Let me help you get back on your feet. You doing all right? Brush it off, brush off the dust, the dirt that you ended up on you when you took a fall, when you took a spill. And then, everything okay? All right, continue on. Move along, continue on your journey. So people who stumble in the journey of life, the sage can come around and help you get back on your feet. So what else? Well, sometimes it's not about stumbling. Sometimes people stray pretty far away from the Tao. Usually, it's because they discover what appears to be an interesting side path. Oh, I wonder where that leads. And, oh, could it be like a shortcut? Now, keep in mind that the Tao itself is a plain and straight path. So in a straight path, in a path that's the most direct route from point A to point B, you would not expect, intellectually, you would not expect that there will be any kind of a shortcut. But such is not clear to most people who are on the path. It's sort of like there's a heavy fog, so you can't really see that the path of the Tao that you are on is nice and level and straight. So you are suspecting that there's going to be a lot of curves and cutbacks. So when you see something that seems like a good way to cut through all that, you may be tempted to take it. That is one of the many side paths in life, many distractions and temptations. They look seductive, but they end up leading nowhere. And if you were to embark on one of these side paths, stray far away from the Tao, you can easily get lost. So that's what I mean by those who have lost their way. In life, this is represented by confusion, disoriented, feeling lost and empty and helpless. What do I do now? Where do I go? I have no idea what I should do with my life. I'm cast adrift. I don't have a direction. Right? And to many people, this will resonate with them. They will say, well, yeah, that sounds familiar. That's me right there. I'm lost. So when you're lost, the sage has an obligation to come around and say, hey, how's it going? You look kind of lost. And you might say, yeah, I have no idea which way to go. Where's how do I get back to the right path? And that's when the sage will say, well, you came this way, and now you have to go back this way, and it'll take you back where you to the point where you turned off to the side path. Now, at that point, the traveler may say that, well, so all this time and effort that I expended walking the side path, I'm going to have to go back to where I took the side path. So all this time would have been wasted. And that's when the sage will say, that's the reason why we should not be taking those side paths. That's why we should just stick to the simplicity of the Tao, one step at a time. So in real life, I have noticed a lot of people exploring many, many different side paths. And for some people, that's all they do. They have encountered the Tao, but they don't recognize that the Tao is the best way to go. So, I will meet them, I will introduce myself to them, I will get to know them, and they will say, yeah, I'm interested in different spiritual traditions, and wanting to see which one is the best fit for me, and this looks pretty good. And sometimes I can tell, even as they are saying those things, that I may not see them again. That after that one meeting, they're moving on to investigate something else. Maybe the next stop is, hey, let's explore Jainism. Let's see what that is like. Or, hey, let's explore, Native American spirituality. What is that like? Now, it isn't that any of these other paths are wrong per se. It's just that the process of investigation is actually never ending. That process of continuously becoming sort of like a spiritual tourist to all these different traditions, that's the side path. That's what leads nowhere. Because it's a pretty sure bet that when they uncover something else, they're not going to stick to it either. They're going to feel restless. They're going to want to move on. So 10 years later, they still haven't really found a direction. They're lost. They're on that side path. Now, the sage can only do so much. the sage can point the way back to the right path. Just keep walking over there. You will find where you took the side path. Get back on the main road. The sage can only do so much. But if people won't listen and say, well, but then this other side path looks kind of interesting too. I want to see what it's like. I'm curious, you know. Okay, well, there's nothing more that the sage can really do. The journey, that is for yourself. You have to walk that journey with your own critical faculties, your own decision-making powers, your judgment. So again, the sage acts as a guide here, and then I remember, you know, when people complained about how to what is really a living sage, a true sage. When people say, well, yeah, you know, I've told so and so that they should, you know, practice the Tao and they should avoid distractions like that. They don't listen to me. You know, they feel like this is just one of the most difficult parts about Tao cultivation. Now, the sage will then smile. I remember the sage smiling and saying that, listen, that's really nothing. The sage is in a position to advise many people, and not only do they stumble and get lost along the way, you know, they do even more. They can even be on the path, but going in the wrong direction. That happens. So what do I mean when I say moving backwards, going in the wrong direction? I mean that instead of progressing on the Tao, they are regressing. That they are not becoming more spiritual, they are becoming less spiritual. You know, they are not becoming less materialistic, they're becoming much, much more materialistic, focusing on the wrong things. So there's actually, you know, instead of spiritual progress, there's actually a lot more negativity that they're going to have to undo if one day they were to wake up and come to their senses. Going off in the wrong direction, going in reverse. So the sage has an obligation to make an attempt to turn them around, but again, the sage does not always succeed. The bottom line is that what the sage does for other people on the same journey of life is to help, to provide assistance. So bottom line, here's the summary, mini summary for all of that. By being selfless and giving people what they need, which is Tao wisdom, the sages accomplish the objective they want, which is to be of service to humanity. And they themselves gain the wisdom that they have dispensed to everybody. So at the very last part of this chapter, if we combine this last line with everything that we have learned so far, you know, from Tao Te Ching 1 to 6, we can see what is already clear to the sages. Here's the insight. In the oneness of the Tao, what we do for others is what we do for ourselves. If you really understand that, you would not be saying, well, so-and-so is not really doing enough for the temple or the Tao community. The reason why you wouldn't say that is because you know that whatever they do, they're doing for themselves. So you would never say, oh, they're not doing enough for themselves. Well, it's up to them. You would also not say, well, haven't I done enough already, you know, for the temple, for the group, for the Tao community? Haven't I done enough? Well, you would never say that if you realize that this was all done for yourself. You would never say, haven't I done enough for myself? Well, I don't know. That's up to you. You have to ask yourself that question. Don't ask other people. So let's tie it all up together. What are some of the concepts from Tao Te Ching? Remember, from 2,500 years ago. So I'm going to call that antiquity for now. Tao concepts from antiquity. What are those that we have recently been exposed to Let me bring those back. So remember the valley, the spirit of the valley. So when we went through that chapter, toward the very end, you have seen how we can think of the valley as we ourselves, like the physical vessels going through this life in the material realm. The spirit of the valley would then correspond to your true self or your soul. So then that particular chapter teaches us to be open and nurturing like the valley. And I hope everyone remembers this. We also learned about the root of heaven and earth, meaning the root of everything, the root of the cosmos, the root of the universe, the root of existence, your existence. You're the ultimate source of everything because you are the root of heaven and earth. So all the good things, all the bad things in your life, well, guess what? You are the ultimate root of it all. You cause everything. You are responsible for everything. What else did we learn recently? Well, today we have learned that you further yourself by furthering other people. So that's going to take probably some time to really absorb, to really understand. So anything else? Yes. Let's go a little bit further. And we have learned about the cyclical nature of everything. So even by looking at 1, 2, and 3, we can tell that, the seasons come and go. Day turns into night, night turns back into day. The phases of the moon. There's a cyclical nature of everything. That's why furthering yourself and furthering others is actually one and the same. Or what we would normally like to say, what goes around comes around. So this brings us to concepts that are from other Eastern cultures, concepts that originally did not come from the Tao sages of ancient China 2,500 years ago, but have since been woven into the fabric of Chinese culture. Karma. This has a Hindu origin. The whole concept of the spiritual principle of cause and effect. Good begets good, bad begets bad, etc. And I would even say that this is everything that we're looking at here on this slide, including karma, everything above that, this is all part of the common human legacy. This is our inheritance. This is what all human beings can understand and learn and become one with. So karma, originally in the Hindu tradition, but has become part of everyday life for the modern Mandarin-speaking Chinese people, as well as other Asians. So what about samsara? The wheel of birth, death, and rebirth. This touches upon the concept of reincarnation that we've been discussing off and on recently. So the idea is that one lifetime is not enough to work through all the karmic duties and obligations and pay off all the karmic debt that you have. You're not done yet. You got to come back and continue doing, continue giving, continue repaying, continue to fulfill your duties. So looking at all of these, looking at this list right here, the 4 here, the 2 here, here's my question for everyone. And I'm going to pause for a moment to ask everyone this question, see what your feedback is. Given that the above appear to have this ancient origin and its root in Eastern traditions, my question to you would be, what can the above be connected and applied to life today, in modern times, not ancient times, in Western society, in the West, not back east, not in Asia, but like here. Where I am is North America, where many people are connecting to from other states in North America. Some are connecting from Europe. So that's what I mean by Western society. Can the above be connected to applied to life today in Western society? If so, how? So I'll pause for a moment so people can provide their opinions and their own personal answers to this particular question. So Tim says, such wisdom is timeless, and I think we can all do this in our own personal lives. What do you think, Alex?
The Tao is everywhere, so yes.
The Tao is everywhere, so yes. Okay. So what I want to do today is to spend a moment to connect the ancient to now, and also connect the East with the West, because I want to address the title that you see here. The title is the common core of humanity. I am talking about the common spiritual core. So there are echoes or reflections or expressions of the same concepts in the West as well as the East, because there's no specific origin, there's no branding, there's no proprietary truth to the ultimate wisdom. It's everywhere. It's from all different traditions. So here's what I'll do. Let me show you what I mean. So here we have scripture. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. You reap what you sow, is what it says. And this is from Galatians 6:7. This is in a letter from St. Paul to the Galatians. So back in those days, more than 2,000 years ago, he was already expressing this idea that, just like the gardener planting your own garden, whatever you plant, you're going to receive, you're going to reap in abundance. So this is from the Bible. What else? I'd like to give you another one. On the subject of benefiting other people, thus benefiting yourself, I would like to go to Matthew 25:40. Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me. This is said by Jesus. When he points out that when you do things, whether good or bad, to others, you are basically doing that same thing, good or bad, to Jesus. So I would like to further suggest that you allow for the possibility that every person is divine within. So the essence of Jesus, the Christ consciousness, if you will, lives within every person. In the Bible, called the kingdom of God. Pardon me. The kingdom of God is within. So when that is the case, you can think of this passage from the Bible as what you have done to the least of your brethren. That is, your neighbors, your fellow human beings, fellow members of this group called the humanity, human beings on the face of this planet. What you have done, good or bad, to the least of them, you have done to the divine essence within, to the Christ consciousness within yourself. And if you think of it that way, it becomes very close to the very last line that we explore in this particular chapter. So this is the integration or perhaps reflection, echoes of East and West. What about from modern times to today? What about, from ancient times to modern times? From ancient times to today. What's the integration there? What is the echo or reflection there? So for that, I would like to borrow a picture to show you. This is the story that I want to relate to you. This is the one that I like to ask everyone to pay attention to. For those that have not encountered it, I think that this will rock your world. This picture comes from a movie called Heaven Can Wait. So it's from decades ago, starring Warren Beatty. I'm borrowing this picture because this is the picture that I was reminded of when I was reading a particular story, a story that I would like to share with you. It shows the main character, Warren Beatty, walking with a man, actually an angel, in this setting, which I'll just call the void. So it reminds me of this because the story that I'm about to tell you is in a setting much like this, two people walking and talking. And in the movie, and what happens in the movie, this happens in the movie very early on. This is in the first 10 minutes of the movie, so I feel like I'm not really giving anything away. So Warren Beatty, he's a football player. He's a second string quarterback for an NFL team. He's looking pretty good. He's training hard. He's getting ready for the big game when he may be called upon to substitute for the main quarterback, the starting quarterback. So he's training, he's riding his bicycle to train his legs, and he has an accident in a tunnel, slamming, head on against an incoming truck, and he finds himself here in the void, in the afterlife. He doesn't quite know what's going on, and the angel is trying to explain it to him. That's behind that particular image. And there are similarities between that and the story that I would like to share with everybody. So let me do that. And let me set the stage for this particular story so you know what's going on. First, it's a story written by a science fiction author. When we're done with the story, I'll tell you who that is. It's told from the perspective of a certain being, and you'll see what that being is as the story progresses. The story takes place in a void, and that's the reason why I have this picture here to help you visualize. So when we're done with the story, I'll be asking you the following questions. How do the ideas presented by the story connect to the Tao? And that's the reason why I like to ask everyone to pay attention. And I also want to point out that because the story is written by a science fiction author, it's a story about what if. What if the ideas or concepts presented by this story is true, and what if some of it is true, or true to some degree? So that's what people get out of stories like this. So without further ado, let me tell the story for you. The story is only slightly modified to be able to facilitate my telling it to you. It's a pretty short story. So see if you can visualize what's going on. So once upon a time, there was a man who died while coming home from work. It was a car accident, and it was not particularly remarkable, but the accident was fatal. resulted in the death of this man. This man left behind his wife and 2 children. The death itself was painless. He didn't feel anything. The first responders who showed up tried to revive him, try to save him, but it was no use because his body was gone. It was completely shattered in the accident. So he was actually much, much better off, going off into the afterlife. And that's when this man met me, the teller of the story. So the man says, what happened? He doesn't really know what's going on. And the man says, where am I? And the being, the entity, responds by saying, well, you died. Matter of factly, because why mince words? The truth is the truth. So the man says, yeah, there was a truck. It was skidding, and I said yes. So the man says, so I died? And again, I say yes. But don't feel too bad about it, because after all, everyone dies. So the man looks around. There was just nothingness. It was just the void. It was just the two people, the man and myself. What is this place? Is this the afterlife? And I say, well, more or less. And the man says, are you God? And I say, yes, I'm God. And the man says, but my kid, my wife, what about them? What's going to happen to them? Are they going to be okay? Are they going to be all right? And I say, this is good. This is very good. You just died, but your main concern is about your wife and your kids. That's good right there. This means that you are not just thinking about yourself. So the man looks at this entity, me, with fascination. And, to the man, this being doesn't look like the stereotypical God, more like just a man or a woman or maybe a teacher in grammar school. So then I say, well, don't worry. In time, your kids will grow up and remember you as the perfect dad. And it's fortunate. They don't have time to grow up to find out, all about your flaws as well as your good point as a father. Your wife will be sad, will be crying, but will be secretly relieved because, to be honest, your marriage has been falling apart for quite some time. But if it's any consolation, your wife is going to feel guilty for feeling that sense of relief. So the man says, what happens now? Do I go to heaven or do I go to hell or where do I go? And I say, no, you're not going to heaven or hell. It's going to be reincarnation. So the man says, oh, so the Hindus were right. They got it right about reincarnation. And I say, well, all religions are right in their own way. Then I say, walk with me. So the man follows along, and we walk through the void. Where are we going? The man asks. And I say, well, nowhere in particular. It's just kind of nice to walk while we talk. So then the man says, well, so what's the point? What's the point of it all? When I get reborn, I'm not going to remember any of this, right? I'll be a baby. So all of my experiences, everything I did in the life that I just had, that I passed away from, I won't remember any of it. And I say, no, that's not so. You have within you all the knowledge and experiences of all of your past lives. You just don't remember them right now. And then I say, your soul is more vast, magnificent than you can possibly imagine. A human mind can only contain a tiny fraction of what you truly are. So think of it this way. Imagine that you are sticking your finger into a glass of water to find out if the temperature of the water is hot or cold. When you do that, you're putting a tiny part of yourself into the water to feel, to experience it. And when you pull your finger back from the water, you gain all the experience that it had when it felt the water. In a similar way, when you are a human being and live out a lifetime, you are dipping your finger into the water of the material world. So in your case, I say to the man, you've been in human form for 48 years. So you haven't really stretched out yet and felt the vastness, the immense consciousness that is you. If we hang out here in the void long enough, you're going to start to remember. You're going to remember absolutely everything. But there's no point in doing that between each life. So then the man asked, how many times have I been reincarnated? And I say, oh, many, many, many times. And in many different lives. Next time, your next incarnation, I'm happy to tell you, you're going to be a Chinese peasant girl in 540 AD. And the man says, what? Chinese peasant girl in 540 AD? Like back in time? Like in the past? The man says, you're going to send me to the past? And I say, well, technically, time, as you know it, only exists in your universe. It doesn't exist here. Things are different where I come from. And the man says, and where's that? Where do you come from? And I say, well, I come from somewhere else. And there are others like me somewhere else. And you're going to want to know what it's like somewhere else. I know, but let's not get into all that right now because honestly, you're not going to be able to understand in this moment. So then the man is a little bit let down and says, but wait, if I get reincarnated to other places, other times, I could have interacted with myself at some point. You know, like if I were to be reincarnated, back some years, and then I encountered the myself that was still alive, then I'm interacting with myself. And I say, yes, that actually happens all the time. And in your life and in the other life, each of your reincarnated life, you're only aware of your own life. So you don't even know that you're interacting with yourself. So then the man says, well, in that case, what's the point of all this? And I say, well, really? You're asking me that question? About the meaning of life? Isn't that a bit of a cliche? And the man persists and says, well, it's a reasonable question. I just want to know. So I look at the man in the eyes. The meaning of life, the reason I made this whole universe is for you. It's for you to grow and mature. And the man says, oh, you mean like for mankind? You want mankind to mature? And I say, no, just you. I made this whole universe for you, which each new life you grow and mature, you become a larger and larger mind, larger and larger intellect. So the man says, just me? The whole universe for me? What about everybody else? And I say, there's no one else. In this universe, it's just you and me. So the man says, but all the people on earth. And I say, all you, different incarnations of you. Wait. everyone? And I say, no, you idiot. And then I slap him on the back by way of congratulations. The man says, I'm every human being who ever lived. And I say, or well, ever lived. The man says, so Abraham Lincoln? And I say, yes. And you're also John Wilkes Booth, who assassinated Abraham Lincoln. And the man says, I'm Hitler? And I say, yes. And you are the millions that he killed. And I'm Jesus? Yes. And you're everyone who followed Jesus. So then the man fell silent. And I explained. Every time you victimized someone, you were victimizing yourself. Every act of kindness you've done to yourself. Every happy and sad moment ever experienced by any human was or will be experienced by you. So the man thought about this for a long time. Why? The man asked. Why do all this? And I say, because someday you will become like me. Because that's what you are. You're one of my kind. You're my child. Whoa, the man said, incredulous, not really believing all this. The man says, you mean I'm God? And I say, well, not yet. You're a fetus. You are a baby. You're still growing. Once you've lived every human life throughout all time, you will have grown enough to be born. So the man says, the whole universe. It's just, and I say, an egg. And now it's time for you to move on to your next life. And then I send the man on his way. The end. So that particular story, as I mentioned, is written by a modern author of science fiction. If you have not encountered that story before, as I said, it may rock your world. So who is the author? And why have I decided to tell this particular story? I think you can begin to see the connection between the ideas expressed in the story and the concept that we have also explored. That particular author is Andy Weir. The name of the story is called The Egg. Andy Weir, you may not recognize who that is, so let me explain. He's the author of the novel called The Martian that was made into a movie starring Matt Damon. And now, we are at the end of our time together. I'm going to jump ahead to the summary slide. So recall all of the concepts that we discussed today and the same points that we talked about last time should take on extra special meaning. Keep your eyes open for opportunities where it can be of service to others. So remember, what does that mean, being of service to others? It's to be of service to yourself. In every situation, ask yourself what needs to be done. What will be the most helpful thing to do for everyone here? Keep in mind, the most helpful thing to do for everyone here will be the most helpful thing for you. Be proactive, take initiative, speak up or do something. No need to wait until someone asks. You wouldn't bother asking for permission if you were taking action on your own behalf. You would simply decide to do it. Let go of the need to take credit. Don't worry about being seen in a positive light. After all, you're doing this for yourself. And lastly, if you can do it seamlessly, take that path. If you can do it in a way that other people don't even realize that it's being done, take that path. It's for you.
Let's go ahead and do the meeting ending ritual, everybody. 起立，面向佛堂，持架深鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，持架各位顶传十一鞠躬，结班一鞠躬。We're done, everybody. Thank you so much.